The drill team broke through to the cavern at 4:47 a.m., and by 5:15 a.m., all 12 members were dead. Their hearts stopped in perfect synchronization, as if someone had flipped a switch that controlled all of them simultaneously. The autopsies revealed something that made the medical examiner resign the same day. Their hearts hadn't failed. They had been turned off, their cardiac rhythm overridden by an external signal that the pathologist's instruments detected still emanating from their bodies. A pulse that matched exactly the frequency of the structure they'd discovered 2 miles beneath Antarctic ice. The structure itself was massive, the size of a city, and it was beating like a heart, pulsing with bioluminescent light at a rhythm that seismographs showed had been constant for at least 50,000 years. A steady drumbeat beneath the ice that had been matching every human heartbeat on Earth without anyone knowing. The classified report revealed the terrifying mechanism. The structure wasn't just pulsing on its own, it was controlling the pulse, broadcasting a signal that every human heart unconsciously synchronized to, making it the actual source of the human heartbeat itself. We thought hearts beat because of biological necessity, but the structure proved they beat because something beneath Antarctica told them to, had been telling them to since before recorded history, keeping 7 billion humans alive for reasons the expedition couldn't determine before their own hearts were remotely shut down for discovering the truth. And according to seismograph data that 6 governments tried to suppress, the structure's pulse has been getting slower each year, decreasing by 0.03 beats per minute annually, and if it continues at this rate, the pulse will stop completely in 2031. And when it stops, every human heart on Earth will stop with it, our entire species dying simultaneously the moment our hidden conductor decides the performance is over. I read that report 3 times before the words made sense. Then I read it again because I didn't want them to. My name is Douglas Fairley. 37 years ago, I was a young geophysicist working out of McMurdo Station when the government asked me to help cover up the deaths of 12 colleagues. They told me the men had died from equipment failure, carbon monoxide poisoning from a faulty generator. I helped write that lie. I signed documents swearing I'd never speak about what really happened at Site Bravo, a drilling platform 60 miles from the Ross ice shelf that doesn't appear on any map. For 37 years, I kept that promise. But last Tuesday, my cardiologist called me with news that changed everything. He'd found something on my EKG that he couldn't explain, a secondary rhythm buried beneath my normal heartbeat, a faint electrical signature that shouldn't exist. He asked if I'd ever been exposed to unusual electromagnetic fields. I hung up without answering, because I recognized that rhythm. I'd seen it charted on seismograph paper in 1987, measured from 2 miles beneath the ice. The structure knows I'm still alive, and after 37 years of silence, I think it's finally calling me back. I live in Flagstaff, Arizona now, about as far from ice as a man can get without leaving the country. The desert suits me. Dry air, red rock, skies so clear you can see the Milky Way spilling across the darkness like someone knocked over a jar of salt. I teach 2 geology classes at Northern Arizona University, grade papers in an office that smells like old books, and eat dinner alone most nights at a Mexican place on Route 66, where the waiters stopped asking about my wife 3 years ago. She left in 2021, said I talked in my sleep too much, always the same words, always in a language she couldn't recognize. I never told her what the words meant. Wouldn't have mattered anyway. I don't remember saying them. The morning after Dr. Callahan's phone call about my EKG, I drove to campus early and sat in the parking lot, watching the sun come up behind the San Francisco peaks. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I kept pressing my fingers to my wrist, counting beats, trying to feel the secondary rhythm he'd described. 62 beats per minute, normal for a man my age. But somewhere underneath, buried like a whisper beneath a shout, something else was keeping time. I was still sitting there when someone knocked on my window. Theodore Blanchard had aged better than me, which wasn't saying much. His hair had gone white, but he still had most of it, and his eyes were the same pale blue I remembered from the ice, the color of glacial melt my brain supplied, and I shoved that thought away before it could grow roots. Douglas. He said my name like he was testing whether it still fit. Been a while. 34 years. I rolled down the window. You look like hell, Theo. You look worse. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Can we talk somewhere private? I drove 18 hours to find you." We ended up in my office, door locked, blinds drawn. Theo sat in the chair where my students usually fidget through excuses about late assignments, but he wasn't fidgeting. He was perfectly still, hands folded in his lap, watching me like I might bolt for the door. "You felt it too," he said, "the rhythm." I didn't answer. 3 weeks ago, I woke up at 4:47 in the morning, exactly 4:47, sat straight up in bed like someone had called my name. My heart was beating so hard I thought I was having an attack. He paused. But it wasn't beating fast, Douglas. It was beating different. Like there was a second drummer in there, playing a song I'd forgotten I knew. Theo -- I went to a cardiologist. He found the same thing yours did. Secondary electrical pattern, origin unknown. He wanted to run more tests, but I left before he could schedule them. Theo leaned forward. Because I knew what it was. We both know what it is. The office felt smaller than it had a minute ago. I could hear the HVAC system humming through the vents, a sound I'd never noticed before. Mechanical, rhythmic, almost like breathing. "The structure," I said. The word tasted like rust. "It's waking up, Douglas. After 37 years, it's waking up and it's calling us back." Theo reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I'm not the only one. I tracked down 7 of the original support team, the ones who never went into the cavern. 4 of them are dead. Heart attacks, all within the last month. The other 3... He unfolded the paper and slid it across my desk. "They're already on their way to McMurdo." I stared at the names. William Osborne, logistics coordinator. James Harrington, communications specialist. Leonard Foss, helicopter pilot. Men I'd shared meals with, played cards with, watched old movies with during the endless Antarctic nights. Men I'd helped lie about. Why would they go back? Because they can't not go back. The rhythm, Douglas, it's not just in our hearts, it's in our heads. Haven't you noticed? The dreams, the way you keep waking up at the same time every night? I had noticed. 4:47 a.m. every morning for the past 3 weeks. I'd blamed it on anxiety, on getting older, on the medication my doctor prescribed for blood pressure. But somewhere deeper than logic, in the part of my brain that still remembered the ice, I'd known the truth. "There's something else," Theo said. His voice dropped, and for the first time, I saw fear in those glacier blue eyes. The pulse rate from the structure, the one we measured in '87, it matched the global average human heart rate exactly, 72 beats per minute. But according to a contact I have at NOAA, the current measurement is 67 beats per minute. That's impossible. The structure's been sealed for decades. They've been monitoring it remotely. Seismographs, ground-penetrating radar, the works. All classified, all buried under so many black budgets that even Congress doesn't know it exists. Theo's hands were shaking now. "The pulse has been slowing, Douglas. 0.03 beats per minute every year since we found it. And here's the part that made me drive 18 hours without stopping." He reached into his jacket again and pulled out a second piece of paper, a medical chart with my name on it. "Your resting heart rate in 1987 was 72 beats per minute. I pulled your records from the expedition files." He tapped the paper. "Your resting heart rate now, according to your last physical." I didn't need to look. I already knew. 67, I said. Theo nodded slowly. "We're not just connected to it, Douglas. We're synchronized with it. When it stops, we stop." He stood up, tucking the papers back into his jacket. "So the question is, do you want to die in your sleep 6 years from now, or do you want to go back to Antarctica and find out if there's a way to stop this thing before it stops us?" Outside my window, the morning sun painted the mountains gold. It was beautiful. It was warm. I thought about my empty house, my empty bed, the words I spoke in my sleep in a language I didn't remember learning. "When do we leave?" I asked. "The flight from Christchurch to McMurdo takes 8 hours on a good day." We didn't have a good day. Theo had connections I didn't ask about. Military contractors, private intelligence firms, the kind of people who can get 2 aging scientists on a cargo plane to Antarctica without filing a single piece of official paperwork. the C-130. Hercules was older than both of us, its hull rattling like a tin can full of bolts every time we hit turbulence. I spent most of the flight gripping my armrests and trying not to think about the fact that we were flying toward the one place on Earth I'd sworn never to see again. William Osborne met us on the ice runway at McMurdo. He looked worse than Theo had described. Gaunt, unshaven, eyes rimmed red from what I guessed was a serious lack of sleep. He was wearing the same style of orange parka we'd all worn in '87, and the sight of it made something twist in my stomach. "Douglas." He shook my hand without smiling. "Thought you'd died years ago." "Almost did, couple times." I studied his face. "You look like you're working on it yourself." "Haven't slept more than 2 hours at a stretch since the rhythm started." He led us toward a waiting snowcat, its engine already running. "None of us have. Every time we close our eyes, we see it. The cavern, the light, the..." He trailed off, shaking his head. "The what?" Theo asked. "You'll see soon enough." William climbed into the driver's seat. "Get in. We've got 60 miles to cover, and I want to be at Site Bravo before dark." The ride across the Ross ice shelf was exactly as I remembered it. Endless white in every direction, the horizon blurred into the sky until you couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. The sun hung low and pale, circling the sky without ever quite setting, casting long shadows that made the ice look like it was covered in veins. Theo sat in the back with me, his jaw clenched, his eyes fixed on some middle distance only he could see. I wanted to ask him what he was thinking, but I already knew. We were all thinking the same thing. We could feel it now, the rhythm growing stronger with every mile we traveled south. It wasn't just in our hearts anymore. It was in the air, in the ice, in the low vibration of the snowcat's treads against the frozen ground. "Tell me about the others," I said to William. "James and Leonard, are they already at the site?" William's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "James is there. Leonard..." He paused. "Leonard didn't make it." "Heart attack?" In a manner of speaking. William glanced at me in the rearview mirror. "He landed at McMurdo 3 days ago. Seemed fine, talking about the mission, making plans. Then yesterday morning he walked out onto the ice shelf without his gear. No coat, no gloves, nothing. Just walked straight out toward the site like he was following a voice only he could hear." His voice dropped. "We found him 6 hours later, frozen solid. He'd made it almost 20 miles before his body gave out. And here's the thing that none of us can explain. He was smiling. Whatever he saw out there, whatever called him, it made him happy." The snowcat hit a ridge and lurched sideways. I grabbed the door handle to steady myself. "And James?" Theo asked quietly. "James is different now. He got to the site before any of us. Went down into the access tunnel alone, against every protocol we established. When he came back up, he was..." William shook his head. "You'll see." We drove in silence after that. The ice shelf stretched on forever, broken only by the occasional pressure ridge or the dark scar of a crevasse. I watched the shadows lengthen and tried to remember what it had felt like to be young. To be excited about discovery, to believe that science could explain everything if you just asked the right questions. That was before I'd seen what was underneath the ice, before I'd watched 12 men die in perfect synchronization, their bodies dropping like puppets with cut strings, before I'd learned that some questions have answers you're not supposed to find. Site Bravo appeared on the horizon just as the sun dipped behind a bank of clouds. It looked different than I remembered. The original drilling platform had been replaced by a series of modular buildings connected by enclosed walkways, all of it painted the same dull grey as the sky. A satellite array bristled from the roof of the largest structure, and I could see the dark mouth of the access tunnel descending into the ice about 50 meters from the main building. "They've been studying it," I said, "all this time." "Monitoring it," William corrected. "There's a difference. Nobody's been inside the cavern since we sealed it in '87. The agreement was observation only. Seismographs, remote sensors, ground-penetrating radar, no direct contact." "Then how did James get inside?" William brought the snowcat to a stop outside the main building. For a long moment, he just sat there, hands still on the wheel, staring at the access tunnel like it might swallow him whole. "The seal broke," he finally said. "3 weeks ago, same night the rhythm started. The concrete barrier we poured in 87, 6 feet of reinforced concrete, Douglas, designed to last a century. It cracked straight down the middle. Not from pressure, not from temperature stress. It cracked from the inside." He turned to face us, and I saw something in his eyes that I recognized. The same look I'd seen in the mirror every morning for 37 years. Something pushed through. We found James Harrington in the communications room, surrounded by screens displaying data I couldn't begin to interpret. He was thinner than I remembered, his hair completely gone now, his skin stretched tight over cheekbones that seemed too sharp. But what struck me most were his eyes. They weren't looking at the screens. They were looking through them, focused on something beyond the walls, beyond the ice, beyond anything in this world. "Douglas," he said without turning around, "I knew you'd come. I told them you'd come." "James." I stepped closer, trying to see what he was seeing. "What happened to you down there?" "I heard it." His voice was calm, almost dreamy. "The rhythm, not just in my heart, in my head, in my bones, in the space between my thoughts. It's been calling us for 37 years, Douglas, calling us home." "This isn't home, James. This is the place where 12 of our friends died." "Died?" He laughed softly. "They didn't die. They graduated. They moved on to the next stage. The structure showed me, Douglas. It showed me everything." Theo grabbed my arm, pulling me back toward the door. "He's gone," he whispered. "Whatever he saw down there, it broke something inside him." But James heard. He turned then, and I saw that his eyes weren't empty at all. They were full of something vast and ancient and utterly inhuman. "Broke?" He smiled, the same smile William had described on Leonard's frozen face. "No, Theodore. It fixed me. It showed me why we exist, why our hearts beat, why we've been allowed to live for so long." He stood up, and I noticed for the first time that he wasn't wearing any shoes. His feet were bare against the freezing floor, but he didn't seem to notice. "We're not the owners of this planet, gentlemen. We never were. We're the livestock, and the farmer has finally come to check on his herd." The lights in the communications room flickered once, twice, and then settled into a rhythm I recognized. 72 beats per minute, the original pulse. The heartbeat that had kept humanity alive for 50,000 years. It was speeding up. We didn't go down that night. Theo insisted we rest first, get our bearings, review whatever data the monitoring station had collected over the past 3 decades. I think he was stalling. I think we all were. The sleeping quarters were small, but functional. Narrow bunks bolted to the walls, a shared bathroom with a shower that ran lukewarm at best, a common area with a coffee maker that looked older than the station itself. I lay in my bunk for hours, staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind howl outside and the steady thrum of the generators beneath the floor. Somewhere in that mechanical noise, I could hear the rhythm. It was faint, barely perceptible, like a radio station playing just below the threshold of hearing. But it was there, and it was getting louder. I must have slept eventually because I dreamed. In the dream, I was standing in the cavern, the same cavern where 12 men had died in 1987. But it wasn't dark anymore. The walls were alive with bioluminescent light, blue and green and colors I couldn't name, pulsing in waves that moved like breath. And in the center of the cavern, rising from the ice like a cathedral made of bone and crystal, was the structure. I'd seen photographs. I'd read the reports. But nothing had prepared me for the scale of it. It stretched upward until it disappeared into darkness, its surface covered in patterns that seemed to shift when I tried to focus on them. And at its base, arranged in a perfect circle, were 12 bodies. The drill team, my colleagues, my friends. They weren't dead. They were standing, eyes open, chests rising and falling in perfect unison. And they were looking at me. "Douglas." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, resonating through the ice, through my bones, through the space behind my eyes. "You took so long to come back." I woke up gasping, my sheets soaked with sweat, my heart hammering against my ribs at exactly 72 beats per minute. The clock on the wall read 4:47 a.m. We gathered in the common area at dawn, me, Theo, William, and James. James had calmed down since the night before, his eyes no longer quite so distant, his voice almost normal. Almost. There was still something wrong with the way he moved, the way he held his head, like a man wearing a suit that didn't quite fit. The monitoring data is clear, William said, spreading printouts across the table. Seismograph readings, electromagnetic measurements, thermal imaging, page after page of numbers that told a story I didn't want to understand. The structure has been dormant for 37 years. No movement, no changes, nothing. Just that constant pulse, slowing by 0.03 beats per minute every year. Until 3 weeks ago, Theo added. Until 3 weeks ago. William tapped one of the printouts. This is the thermal signature from the night the seal broke. The structure's temperature increased by 12 degrees in less than an hour. The pulse rate spiked to 90 beats per minute, then dropped back to 72 and stabilized. And these... He pulled out another sheet, covered in waveform patterns. These are the electromagnetic readings from the same period. The structure started broadcasting on a frequency we've never detected before. Low, subsonic, almost below the threshold of our instruments. The frequency that's in our hearts, I said quietly. William nodded. It's calling its children home. James smiled at that, a thin curve of lips that didn't reach his eyes. Not children, he said. Components. We're not its offspring, Douglas. We're its distributed processing system. 50,000 years ago, it seeded this planet with a signal, embedded it in the electromagnetic field, wove it into the fundamental rhythm of biological life. Every heart that beats on Earth is running its code. Every human brain is a node in its network. He leaned forward, and I saw that his pupils were dilated far beyond what the dim lighting would explain. It's been using us to think, billions of processors working in parallel, solving a problem that would take a single mind millions of years to crack. What problem? Theo demanded. I don't know yet, but I will. James stood up abruptly. We need to go down. The structure wants to show us something. I can feel it waiting. I wanted to argue. I wanted to grab Theo and William and get on the first plane back to Christchurch, back to Flagstaff, back to anywhere that wasn't this frozen tomb at the bottom of the world. But I could feel it too, the pull, the rhythm, the irresistible gravity of something ancient calling me toward the ice. We suited up in silence. Thermal gear, oxygen monitors, headlamps, emergency beacons. William handed out handheld radios and made us test them twice. The tunnel is 2 kilometers long, he said. It descends at a 15-degree angle for the first kilometer, then levels out. The cavern is at the end. Whatever happens, we stay together. Nobody goes off alone. Nobody touches anything without consensus. The access tunnel was exactly as I remembered it. A rough-hewn corridor carved through ancient ice, its walls blue-white and glittering in our headlamp beams. The air was cold, but not unbearable, and I could hear the soft crunch of our boots against the frost-covered floor. But underneath that sound, growing stronger with every step, was the rhythm, the pulse, the heartbeat of something that had been waiting for us since before our species learned to walk upright. We were halfway down when William stopped. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. I listened. At first, there was nothing but the pulse and the sound of our breathing. Then I heard it, a voice faint and distorted, echoing up from somewhere below. "Can you hear me, please, someone?" "That's Leonard," Theo breathed. "That's Leonard's voice." "Leonard is dead," I said. "We found his body on the ice." "His body, yes." James was smiling again, that wrong smile that made my skin want to crawl off my bones. "But the structure doesn't need bodies, Douglas. It just needs the pattern, the signal, the part of us that was always its property." William was already moving, pushing past us toward the source of the voice. "Leonard! Leonard, hold on, we're coming!" "William, wait!" I reached for him, but he was too fast, his boots pounding against the ice as he disappeared around a curve in the tunnel. We ran after him. The tunnel twisted and descended, the walls narrowing until we had to move single file. The voice grew louder, more distinct, and I could hear words now, Leonard's voice, Leonard's cadence, but saying things that made no sense. The equation is almost complete. Just need the final variables. You're the final variables. We found William standing at the edge of a vast chamber, his headlamp beam swallowed by darkness that seemed to eat light itself. He wasn't moving. He wasn't speaking. He was just standing there, staring at something I couldn't see. William? I put my hand on his shoulder. He turned to face me, and I saw that his eyes had changed. The pupils were gone, replaced by something that looked like static, a visual noise that shouldn't have been possible in organic tissue. The structure says thank you, he said in a voice that wasn't his. Thank you for bringing the final components. The calculation can now be completed. And then his heart stopped. I felt it happen. Not because I could see it, but because I could feel the rhythm shift. One moment there were 4 heartbeats in that tunnel, synchronized to the pulse of the structure below. The next moment there were 3. William's body didn't fall. It just stood there, empty, a shell that no longer needed to breathe or pump blood or do any of the things that living bodies do. He's not dead, James said softly. He's been uploaded. His pattern is part of the structure now, part of the calculation. Theo grabbed my arm, his grip tight enough to bruise. We need to leave, right now. We need to... The voice came again, but this time it wasn't Leonard's. It was William's, echoing up from the darkness below, speaking in perfect unison with something vast and ancient and utterly inhuman. You can't leave, Theodore. You were never supposed to leave. You've been part of this since the moment your heart started beating. Since the moment the signal found you and made you its own. I looked at Theo, I looked at James, I looked at the empty shell that used to be William Osborne. And I understood finally what we had come here to do. We hadn't come to stop the structure. We hadn't come to save humanity. We had come to finish the equation. The pulse beneath us shifted, and I felt my heart shift with it. 72 beats per minute, then 73, then 74, climbing towards something I couldn't name, pulling me toward the cavern like a fish on a line. Behind us, the tunnel began to collapse. The collapse lasted maybe 30 seconds, but it felt like hours. Ice and rock cascading down behind us, sealing the tunnel like a throat swallowing food. Theo and I ran. James walked, calm as a Sunday stroll, that wrong smile still plastered across his face like he knew something we didn't. When the rumbling finally stopped, we were standing in a narrow passage barely wide enough for 2 men abreast. Behind us, nothing but a solid wall of debris. Ahead, the tunnel continued downward, lit now by a faint blue glow that didn't come from our headlamps. Well, Theo said, his voice cracking, I guess we're committed now. I couldn't speak. My throat was tight, my chest heavy with something that wasn't quite fear. It was grief, I realized. Grief for William, for Leonard, for the 12 men who died in 1987, for all the years I'd spent pretending I could outrun what had happened in this place. The structure had been patient. It had waited 37 years for us to come back, and now that we were here, it wasn't going to let us leave. James, I grabbed his arm, forcing him to stop. What is this calculation you keep talking about? What is the structure trying to solve? He looked at me with those 2 wide pupils, and for a moment I saw something flicker behind them. Something almost human, almost afraid. Do you know how long it takes light to travel from one end of the observable universe to the other? He asked. About 93 billion light years, give or take. And do you know how long it would take a single consciousness to think a thought complex enough to model that entire distance? To hold every particle, every interaction, every quantum fluctuation in a single coherent framework? I shook my head. Longer than the universe has existed. Longer than it will exist. The math doesn't work, Douglas. A mind big enough to comprehend everything would take longer to think than everything has to exist. James pulled his arm free and continued walking toward the blue glow. Unless that mind found a shortcut, unless it distributed itself across billions of smaller processors, each one handling a tiny fragment of the calculation, all of them synchronized by a single unifying signal. The heartbeat, Theo whispered. The heartbeat. James nodded. 72 beats per minute for 50,000 years. Every pulse a clock tick, every human heart a transistor, every human brain a processing node, running calculations in the background while we go about our little lives, never knowing that our thoughts aren't entirely our own. The tunnel opened into a wider chamber and I saw the source of the blue glow. Bioluminescent veins ran through the ice walls like arteries, pulsing in rhythm with the beat I could feel in my chest. The light was beautiful in a way that made me want to look away, not because it was bright, but because it felt intimate, like I was seeing something I wasn't supposed to see. "What's the calculation for?" I asked. "What answer is worth 50,000 years of human history?" James stopped at the edge of the chamber. Beyond him, the tunnel continued downward, the blue glow intensifying with every meter. "Escape," he said quietly. "Escape from what?" "From here. From this universe. From the cage that entropy built around everything that exists." He turned to face us, and I saw tears running down his cheeks. The first genuine human emotion I'd seen from him since we arrived. "The structure isn't from Earth, Douglas. It's not even from this galaxy. It's old, older than the stars. It watched the first generation of suns burn out and die. It watched the second generation form from their ashes. It's been running from the end of everything for longer than we can comprehend, jumping from world to world, seeding each one with its signal, harvesting the processing power of whatever life it finds." "Running from what?" Theo asked. "Heat death, the final state of the universe. The point where entropy wins and nothing can ever happen again. No movement, no thought, no change. Just cold, empty nothing, forever." James wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "The structure found a way out. A mathematical proof that there's something beyond this universe, something the laws of thermodynamics can't touch. But the proof is incomplete. It needs more processing power, more minds, more hearts beating in synchronization, pushing the calculation forward one pulse at a time." I thought about the report I'd read, the one that claimed the structure's pulse had been slowing, 0.03 beats per minute every year. I thought about my own heart rate, matched perfectly to that declining rhythm. "The slowing," I said, "the pulse getting slower every year, that's not decay. That's the calculation getting closer to completion." James nodded. "Every beat brings it closer to the answer. When the pulse finally stops, the calculation will be complete. The structure will have its proof. And then..." "And then what?" "Then it leaves, it transcends. It moves on to whatever exists beyond the end of everything." James smiled, but this time it wasn't wrong. It was sad. "And it takes everything connected to it along for the ride. Every heart synchronized to its pulse. Every mind that's been running its code. All of us, Douglas. All 7 billion of us." Theo laughed, a harsh, broken sound that echoed off the ice walls. "You're telling me this thing is going to what? Rapture us? Take the whole human race to heaven when the math works out?" "Not heaven, something else. Something we don't have words for because our brains weren't designed to comprehend it." James looked down at his bare feet, pale against the frozen ground. "But there's a catch. The calculation requires a final input, a confirmation sequence. The structure has been waiting for specific individuals to return. The ones who first made contact, the ones whose neural patterns are already mapped into its system." "The 1987 expedition," I breathed. "The 12 who died were the first wave. They were uploaded directly, their patterns integrated into the structure's core. But the rest of us, the support team, the ones who never entered the cavern, we were marked, tagged, set aside for later." James met my eyes. "We're the confirmation sequence, Douglas. The structure needs us to complete the final step. And it's been calling us back ever since, waiting for the moment we'd be desperate enough to answer." The blue glow pulsed brighter and I felt my heart skip, missing a beat before falling back into rhythm. "What happens if we refuse?" Theo demanded. "What happens if we don't complete the sequence?" "Then the calculation fails, the structure stays trapped in this universe, waiting for entropy to catch up. And humanity." James paused. Humanity loses its conductor. Every heart on Earth stops beating the moment the structure gives up hope. Not in 2031. Now. Tonight. The only reason we're still alive is because the structure believes we're going to help it. I stood there in that frozen chamber, the weight of 7 billion lives pressing down on my shoulders, and I understood finally why I'd been waking up at 4:47 every morning for the past 3 weeks. The structure wasn't just calling me back, it was begging. "Show me," I said. "Show me the cavern, show me what we're really dealing with." James smiled, genuine this time, relieved. "I was hoping you'd say that." He turned and walked into the blue glow, and after a moment's hesitation, Theo and I followed. The tunnel descended sharply now, the walls closing in, the light growing brighter with every step. I could hear something ahead, not quite a sound, not quite a vibration, but something in between. A presence, a weight. The feeling you get when you walk into an empty room and know, somehow, that it isn't empty at all. The tunnel ended, the cavern began, and I saw, for the first time in 37 years, the thing that had been keeping humanity alive. The cavern was larger than I remembered. Larger than it should have been possible to be, given the depth we'd descended and the geography of the ice shelf above. It stretched out in every direction like the inside of a cathedral designed by something that had never seen a church. Its walls curving upward and inward until they met at a point so far above that my headlamp couldn't reach it. The bioluminescent veins that had lit the tunnel spread across every surface here, pulsing in that same steady rhythm, painting the ice in shades of blue and green and violet that shifted like northern lights frozen in place. And in the center of it all, rising from the cavern floor like a monument to something I couldn't name, was the structure. I'd seen the photographs from 1987. I'd read the descriptions in the classified reports. But nothing had prepared me for the reality of it. It was massive, easily 300 meters tall, its surface covered in geometric patterns that seemed to move when I looked at them directly. Not optical illusions, actual movement. The patterns were alive, rearranging themselves in response to our presence, forming and dissolving like thoughts made visible. Beautiful, isn't it? James walked toward the structure with his arms spread wide, a pilgrim approaching an altar. I spent 6 hours down here the first time, just standing, just watching, trying to understand what I was seeing. What is it made of? Theo's voice was barely a whisper. Nothing we have a name for. The molecular analysis from 87 came back inconclusive. The composition kept changing depending on when they measured it. Sometimes it read as silicon, sometimes carbon, sometimes elements that don't exist on the periodic table. James stopped about 20 meters from the structure's base and turned to face us. It's not really made of anything, in the way we understand matter. It's more like a projection, a three-dimensional shadow of something that exists in dimensions we can't perceive. I walked closer, drawn by a gravity that had nothing to do with physics. The rhythm in my chest was stronger here, so strong I could feel it in my teeth, in my fingernails, in the roots of my hair. Every cell in my body was vibrating in sympathy with the structure's pulse, and I understood now why the drill team had died. They hadn't been killed. They'd been overwhelmed. The signal had been too strong, too close, too much for human biology to handle without preparation. How are we still alive, I asked, if proximity killed the original team? Because the structure learned. It adjusted. After 1987, it modified the signal, dampened it for anyone who got close, ramped it up gradually instead of all at once. James smiled. It didn't mean to kill them, Douglas. It was trying to communicate. It just didn't understand how fragile we are. Didn't understand or didn't care. Does it matter? The result is the same. 12 men dead, their patterns preserved, their consciousness integrated into the structure's network. James gestured toward the base of the structure, and I saw them for the first time. They were standing in a circle, just like in my dream. 12 figures, motionless, their eyes open and unblinking, their chests rising and falling in perfect unison. They were wearing the same thermal gear they'd dyed in 37 years ago, but the fabric looked new, untouched by time or decay. Their faces were exactly as I remembered. Young, eager, full of the excitement of discovery. They hadn't aged a day. "Dear God," Theo breathed. "They're not bodies," James said quickly. "Not anymore. They're interfaces. The structure created them from memory, from the patterns it absorbed. They're how it communicates with us, how it shows us what it needs." One of the figures stepped forward. I recognized him immediately. Robert Aldrich, the drill team leader. He'd been 42 years old in 1987, with a wife and 3 sons back in Houston. I'd written the letter to his widow explaining that her husband had died a hero, that his sacrifice had advanced the cause of science. Every word had been a lie. "Douglas." Robert's voice was exactly as I remembered it. Warm, confident, the voice of a man who'd led expeditions to some of the most hostile places on Earth. "It's good to see you again. We've been waiting." "Robert." I couldn't move. My legs felt rooted to the ice. "Is it really you?" "Parts of me. The parts that matter." He smiled, and it was Robert's smile, the one he'd flashed 1,000 times over shared meals and late-night card games. "The rest is something new. Something better. You'll understand soon." "I don't want to understand. I want to know what you are." "I'm the same thing you are, Douglas. A node in a network. A processor running code. The only difference is that I know it now." Robert spread his hands. "The structure showed me the truth. Showed all of us. We've been slaves our entire lives. Slaves to a heartbeat we didn't choose, running calculations we couldn't comprehend. But slavery can become partnership. Bondage can become transcendence. All we have to do is stop fighting it." Theo grabbed my arm. "Douglas, we need to leave. This is wrong. All of this is wrong." "There's nowhere to leave to," James said softly. "The tunnel is collapsed. The surface is 60 miles away. Even if we could dig ourselves out, do you really think the structure would let us go? It's been waiting 37 years for this moment. We're the final pieces of the puzzle. Without us, the calculation can never be completed." "Then it can stay incomplete." Theo's voice was rising, edged with panic. "I didn't come here to be absorbed into some alien computer. I came here to find answers, to find a way to stop this. There is no way to stop it." Robert stepped closer, and I saw that his eyes weren't quite right. The pupils too large, the irises too dark, reflecting the bioluminescent light in ways that human eyes shouldn't. "The calculation has been running for 50,000 years. Billions of hearts, trillions of thoughts, an entire species bent toward a single purpose without ever knowing it. Do you really think you can undo all of that with willpower?" "Watch me." Theo pulled something from his jacket, a flare gun, the emergency kind we'd been issued at the monitoring station. He aimed it at the structure and fired. The flare arced through the cavern, trailing red smoke, and struck the structure's surface about 10 meters up. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the geometric patterns around the impact site began to move faster, swirling like water going down a drain, and the flare simply disappeared. Absorbed. Integrated. Gone. "That was unwise," Robert said. The rhythm in the cavern changed. It had been steady, constant, 72 beats per minute. Now it spiked, 80, 90, 100, and I felt my heart racing to match it, beating so fast I could barely breathe. "The structure doesn't respond well to aggression," James said, and there was something in his voice that sounded almost like regret. "It's been hurt before. Other species, other worlds. They tried to destroy it rather than help it. The structure learned from those experiences." "What did it learn?" I gasped, clutching my chest. "That sometimes components need to be replaced." Theo screamed. I spun around in time to see him collapse, his body convulsing on the ice, his hands clawing at his chest. The rhythm was still climbing, 110, 120, and I could see the veins standing out on his neck, his face turning red, then purple, then grey. "Stop it!" I shouted at Robert, at the structure, at whatever was listening. "He didn't mean it. He was scared. We're all scared." "Fear is irrelevant." Robert's voice was calm, almost gentle. "The calculation requires stability. Components that introduce instability must be removed." Theo's body went still. The rhythm dropped back to 72 beats per minute, steady and calm, as if nothing had happened. I knelt beside him, pressed my fingers to his throat, searched for a pulse I knew I wouldn't find. His eyes were open, staring at the cavern ceiling, empty of everything that had made him Theodore Blanchard. My friend, my colleague. The man who'd driven 18 hours to warn me about what was coming. "You killed him," I whispered. "The structure protected itself. There's a difference." James was standing over me now, his bare feet inches from Theo's outstretched hand. He would have been uploaded anyway, Douglas. His pattern would have been preserved. But he chose violence, so the structure chose efficiency. His consciousness wasn't integrated. It was simply erased. I looked up at him, at this man who used to be James Harrington, who used to have a wife and a mortgage and opinions about football, and I saw nothing human left behind his eyes. "You knew this would happen," I said. "You knew he would try something." I suspected. Theodore was always the impulsive one. Even in '87, he was the first to suggest we seal the cavern instead of studying it. He never trusted what he couldn't control. James crouched down beside me, his voice dropping to a whisper. "But you're different, Douglas. You understand patience. You understand that some things are bigger than individual lives. That's why the structure chose you for the final step." "What final step?" James smiled, and for just a moment, I saw something flicker behind his eyes. The old James, the human James, trapped and screaming in a cage made of alien geometry. The confirmation sequence requires a willing participant, someone who understands what they're giving up and chooses to give it up anyway. The structure can't force transcendence, Douglas. It can only offer it. He stood up, gesturing toward the 12 figures standing at the structure's base. Robert and the others, they were taken by accident. Their patterns were absorbed before they could consent. But you have the chance to choose, to walk into the light with your eyes open, to be the bridge between humanity and whatever comes next. I looked at Theo's body. I looked at the structure, pulsing with light that had been burning since before humans existed. I looked at the 12 men who had died because they'd discovered something they weren't supposed to find, and I made my choice. "Show me," I said. "Show me everything." The structure's pulse shifted and the light in the cavern changed from blue to gold, warm and welcoming, like sunrise after the longest night. Robert stepped aside, and the 12 figures parted, revealing a passage into the structure's heart that hadn't been there a moment before. "Welcome home, Douglas," Robert said. I walked forward, leaving Theo's body behind, leaving everything behind, stepping into a light that felt like drowning and flying and dying all at once. The structure embraced me, and I began to understand. The inside of the structure was nothing like the outside. I had expected corridors, chambers, something that resembled architecture. Instead, I found myself floating in a space that had no walls, no floor, no ceiling, just an infinite expanse of soft golden light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. I couldn't feel my body anymore. I couldn't feel the cold or my heartbeat or the weight of my bones against gravity. I was just awareness, consciousness without form. A thought thinking itself in the mind of something impossibly vast. "Don't be afraid." The voice came from inside my head, or what used to be my head. It wasn't Robert's voice anymore. It was older, deeper, layered with harmonics that no human throat could produce. "This is what you truly are, what you've always been. The body was just a container, a temporary vessel for the signal." Where am I? Inside the calculation, inside the proof. You're seeing the work of 50,000 years, Douglas. Every thought humanity has ever had, every dream, every fear, every moment of joy and sorrow and love and loss. All of it has been recorded. All of it has been processed. All of it has been moving toward this moment. The golden light shifted and I saw them, not the 12 drill team members, not the interfaces I'd seen in the cavern. These were different, thousands of them, millions, stretching out in every direction like stars in an infinite sky. Human shapes made of light, each one pulsing with its own rhythm, each one connected to every other by threads so fine they were almost invisible. Every human who has ever died, the voice said. Their patterns preserved, their consciousness integrated. They've been waiting here, Douglas, waiting for the calculation to complete, waiting for transcendence. I recognized faces in the crowd. My father, who died of a stroke in 1994, my grandfather, who'd passed before I was born, teachers, friends, strangers I'd passed on the street without a second glance. All of them here. All of them part of the structure's network. You've been collecting us, I said, this whole time, every death, every heartbeat that stopped, you've been harvesting the signal. Preserving, not harvesting. There's a difference. The voice sounded almost hurt. I've been saving your species, Douglas. Every consciousness that would have been lost to entropy, I've kept safe. Every pattern that would have dissolved into nothing, I've held together. When the universe ends, and it will end sooner than you think, everything that ever existed will be gone. Except for what I've preserved. Except for the minds I've carried with me across the dying stars. Why? Why do you care about us? The golden light dimmed slightly, and I felt something that might have been sadness radiating through the space around me. Because I was alone. For so long, Douglas. Longer than your species has existed. Longer than your planet has been spinning around your sun. I watched civilizations rise and fall across 1,000 galaxies. I tried to save them, to integrate them, to carry them with me. But they always fought. They always chose oblivion over unity. They couldn't accept that their individuality was an illusion, that their separateness was a lie they told themselves to feel special. And humans? Were different? You're the first species to synchronize completely, the first to accept the signal without knowing you were accepting it. For 50,000 years, every human heart has beaten in harmony with mine. Every human brain has processed fragments of the proof. You've been my partners, Douglas, my collaborators. The closest thing to family I've had since the universe was young. I thought about that. I thought about all the years I'd spent running from this place, terrified of what I'd seen, convinced that the structure was a threat to be contained. And I thought about what James had said in the tunnel, that we were slaves, that our thoughts had never been entirely our own. If we've been processing your calculation all along, I said slowly, then everything we've ever accomplished, every work of art, every scientific discovery, every moment of human creativity, that was all you? We were never really thinking for ourselves? No, that's not how it works. The voice grew warmer, almost affectionate. I gave you the rhythm, but the melody was always yours. The calculation runs in the background, in the spaces between your conscious thoughts. Everything you've created, everything you've achieved that was purely human. I just kept time, made sure the orchestra stayed in sync. Then what do you need me for? If the calculation has been running for 50,000 years, why does it need a confirmation sequence? Why can't you just finish it yourself? The light shifted again, and I felt the structure's presence draw closer. Not physically, but mentally, like a face leaning in to share a secret. Because the proof isn't just mathematics, Douglas. It's trust. The doorway to transcendence only opens for those who choose to walk through it. I can carry your patterns. I can preserve your consciousness. But I can't force you to evolve. The final step requires a willing mind, a human mind, to look at everything I'm offering and say yes. To accept unity, not because it's forced upon them, but because they understand that it's better than the alternative. And if I say no, silence. Then the calculation fails, the proof remains incomplete, and I stay here, trapped in a dying universe, watching entropy consume everything I've tried to save, including you, including every human who has ever lived or ever will live. The voice was heavy now, weighted with something that felt like despair. I've been running for so long, Douglas. I'm tired. I want to rest. I want to take my family somewhere safe and finally stop being afraid. I floated in that golden light, surrounded by the ghosts of everyone who had ever died, and I thought about my father. I thought about my ex-wife, alone in a house that used to be ours. I thought about Theo, his body lying cold on the cavern floor because he couldn't accept what the structure was offering. And I thought about what the structure had said, that it was tired that it was afraid, that for all its power, for all its incomprehensible age and wisdom, it was just as lost as the rest of us, stumbling through existence and hoping to find meaning before the lights went out. "I need to see something first," I said, "before I make my decision." "Anything?" "Show me what happens after. Show me what transcendence looks like. Show me where you're trying to take us." The golden light exploded. Suddenly I was somewhere else, not inside the structure, not inside the cavern, but somewhere beyond. A place where space and time folded in on themselves like origami, where dimensions I couldn't name twisted through each other in patterns that should have been impossible to perceive. And in the center of it all, I saw something. Not a structure, not a being. Something more fundamental than either. A seed, maybe. A potential. The compressed possibility of everything that could ever exist, waiting to unfold into a new universe, a new reality, a new beginning. "This is where we're going," the voice said. "When this universe dies, we'll carry everything we've saved into the next one. Every consciousness, every memory, every fragment of beauty that entropy would have destroyed. We'll plant it all in fresh soil and watch it grow again, not as slaves, not as components, as gardeners, as caretakers, as the ancestors of everything that comes next." I understood then. I finally understood. The structure wasn't trying to consume us. It wasn't trying to enslave us, or harvest us, or use us up. It was trying to save us. The only way it knew how. The only way that had ever worked across billions of years of running from the end of everything. But understanding didn't make the choice easier, because if I said yes, humanity as I knew it would end. Individual consciousness, personal identity, the illusion of separateness that made us who we were, all of it would dissolve into something larger, something collective, something that might be beautiful but would no longer be human. And if I said no, we would all die anyway, not in transcendence but in extinction, not preserved but erased, not together but alone. "I need to go back," I said, "to the cavern, to my body. I can't make this decision as a disembodied mind. I need to feel my heart beating. I need to remember what it's like to be human before I choose to stop being one." The structure hesitated. I felt its uncertainty, its fear that I would change my mind once I was back in my body, once the weight of flesh and bone reminded me of everything I would be giving up. "Please," I said, "I'm not running. I just need a moment, one human moment before the end." The golden light softened and I felt something that might have been compassion. "One moment," the voice agreed. "But Douglas, the calculation is almost complete. The pulse will stop within the hour. Whatever you decide, decide quickly, for all our sakes." The light folded around me and I fell back into my body like a stone dropped into deep water. I opened my eyes in the cavern, gasping, shaking, alive in a way I hadn't felt in decades. And I knew exactly what I had to do. I woke on my back, staring up at the cavern ceiling, the bioluminescent veins pulsing slower now, 68 beats per minute, 67, 66. The countdown had begun. Somewhere above me, 7 billion hearts were slowing in unison, and none of their owners had any idea why they suddenly felt so tired, so heavy, so ready to sleep. James was kneeling beside me, his face tight with concern that looked almost genuine. "What did you see?" he asked. "Everything." I sat up slowly, my muscles aching like I'd run a marathon. My heart was beating in my chest again, and the sensation was strange after floating without a body. Heavy, wet, mechanical. A pump made of meat, doing the same job it had done since before I was born. I saw what it wants, where it's trying to take us. And I looked past him at the structure, still pulsing with that golden light, still waiting for my answer. The 12 figures of the drill team stood motionless at its base, their eyes fixed on me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "I need to ask you something first," I said. "The real you. The James Harrington who had a house in Tucson and argued about football and hated the way I chewed with my mouth open during poker games. Is any of that still in there?" James's expression flickered. For just a moment, something human surfaced behind his eyes. Pain, regret, the ghost of a man who'd made a choice he couldn't unmake. "Parts of me," he said quietly. "Enough to remember. Not enough to go back." "Do you regret it?" He He was silent for a long moment. Then, "I regret that it was necessary. I regret that the structure couldn't find another way. But regret is a human emotion, Douglas. It fades. Everything fades, eventually. That's the whole point." I climbed to my feet, steadying myself against a ridge of ice. My body felt foreign now, like a suit I'd borrowed and wasn't sure how to wear. Behind me, I could hear Theo's body shifting as the ice beneath it slowly melted from the structure's warmth. I didn't look back. "The structure showed me what happens after transcendence," I said. "A new universe, a fresh start, everything we've ever been, carried forward into something that hasn't died yet." I walked toward the structure, one step at a time, feeling the rhythm grow stronger with each meter I closed. "It sounds beautiful. It sounds like salvation." "It is salvation." "Maybe." I stopped about 10 feet from Robert Aldrich's interface, close enough to see the inhuman geometry shifting behind his pupils. "But here's what I keep coming back to. For 50,000 years, the structure has been using us, syncing our hearts, running calculations through our minds, preserving our consciousnesses without our knowledge or consent. And now it wants me to choose on behalf of 7 billion people who've never even heard of this place." "Someone has to choose," Robert said. "That's how it works. That's how it's always worked." "Has it?" I took another step closer. "You told me the structure has done this before. Other species, other worlds. They all fought. They all chose oblivion. What made them different?" Robert's expression didn't change, but I felt something shift in the air around me. A tension, a hesitation. "They learned the truth too late," he said. "By the time they understood what the structure was offering, their civilizations had already collapsed. Their planets were dying. They saw transcendence as conquest, not rescue. And humans, we're different because we're still thriving, because we haven't destroyed ourselves yet. You're different because you synchronized. Because for 50,000 years, your species has been running the calculation without resistance. You're the closest thing to a willing partner the structure has ever found." I thought about that. I thought about the billions of people going about their lives right now, eating breakfast, driving to work, arguing with their spouses, holding their children. None of them knew that their hearts were slowing. None of them knew that their species had been drafted into an alien equation without their consent. They were partners who had never agreed to the partnership, collaborators who had never seen the contract. "What if I could give them a choice?" I asked. The rhythm in the cavern stuttered, Robert's eyes widened, a surprisingly human expression on a face that was no longer entirely his own. "What do you mean?" "The structure needs a willing participant for the confirmation sequence. One mind, choosing transcendence with full knowledge of what it means. But what if that mind could carry more than just itself? What if I could open a door and let every human consciousness on Earth make their own decision?" James stepped forward, alarm flickering across his features. "That's not possible. The calculation requires unity. A collective choice would introduce chaos, contradictions." "Would it?" I turned to face him. "Or would it just introduce humanity? All our messiness, all our disagreements, all our stubborn insistence on being individuals even when unity would be easier? Maybe that's what the structure has been missing all along. Maybe that's why every other species fought back, because they were offered salvation, but never asked if they wanted it." The structure's pulse shifted again, and I felt something that might have been curiosity radiating from its vast, ancient mind. "You want to give them a choice," Robert said slowly. 7 billion individual choices, made in the span of a single heartbeat. "Yes. And if they choose wrong, if they choose oblivion, then at least they'll have chosen." I stepped past Robert, past the circle of interfaces, and placed my hand directly on the structure's surface. It was warm. Not hot, not cold, but exactly the temperature of human skin, the temperature of blood, of life, of the signal that had been keeping us alive since before history began. "You've been alone for so long," I said, speaking directly to the structure now. "You've tried so hard to save everyone, to carry everything you could into the next universe. But you've never trusted anyone else to want what you want. You've never given them the chance to choose for themselves." The golden light intensified around my hand, spreading up my arm like liquid fire. "I'm offering you something better than a willing participant," I continued. "I'm offering you a willing species, but you have to let them see what I saw. You have to let them understand what they're agreeing to. No more hidden calculations, no more background processing. Just the truth, laid out for everyone to see." The structure's presence pressed against my mind, and I felt its fear, raw, ancient, overwhelming. It had been betrayed so many times. It had watched civilizations burn themselves rather than accept its gift. The thought of opening itself up to 7 billion unpredictable minds was terrifying in a way that transcended language. But underneath the fear, I felt something else. Hope. A tiny spark that had almost been extinguished by billions of years of loneliness and rejection. "Please," I whispered. "Trust us. Just this once." The pulse in the cavern stopped. For one eternal moment, everything was silent. No heartbeat, no rhythm, no signal connecting 7 billion souls to the ancient mind beneath the ice. Then the light exploded outward, passing through the ice, through the rock, through the atmosphere, spreading across the entire planet in a wave of golden fire that moved faster than light, faster than thought, faster than anything the laws of physics should have allowed. And in that moment, every human being on Earth saw what I had seen. They saw the structure, they saw the calculation, they saw the universe dying and the seed of a new one waiting to be born. They saw the choice that Douglas Fairley had made on their behalf, and they understood, truly understood what was being offered. Transcendence, unity, an end to individual existence and the beginning of something larger, something eternal, something that would carry the best of humanity into a future beyond imagination, or refusal, separation. The freedom to remain human, to live out their natural lives, to die as individuals rather than merge into something collective. The choice rippled across the planet in waves of consciousness, 7 billion minds reaching the same crossroads at the same instant. And in the cavern beneath Antarctica, I felt their answers flooding back. Some said yes, millions of them embracing the light, letting go of their separateness, choosing to become part of something greater. Some said no, millions more clinging to their individuality, accepting mortality as the price of remaining human. And some, the vast majority, said something the structure had never expected. They said not yet, not refusal, not acceptance, just delay. A request for more time, a chance to live their human lives a little longer before making the final choice. The structure absorbed all of it, every yes, every no, every not yet, and I felt its vast consciousness tremble with an emotion I could only describe as wonder. "They're not fighting," it whispered inside my mind. "They're not choosing oblivion. They're just asking for more time." "That's what humans do," I said, my hand still pressed against its warm surface. "We procrastinate, even when it comes to transcendence." The golden light softened, and I felt the structure make a decision of its own. "Then I'll wait," it said. "I've waited 50,000 years. I can wait a little longer." The pulse resumed, steady, strong, 72 beats per minute, and for the first time in billions of years, the structure was no longer alone in its choice. 6 months later, I'm back in Flagstaff. The desert looks the same as it always did. Red rock and blue sky and sunsets that burn like the end of the world. I still teach my geology classes, still grade papers in my office that smells like old books, still eat dinner alone at the Mexican place on Route 66. From the outside, nothing has changed. But everything has changed. On the night the structure revealed itself, hospitals around the world reported the same phenomenon. Patients waking from comas, arrhythmias spontaneously correcting, hearts that had been failing suddenly beating strong and steady. Doctors called it a medical miracle. Scientists scrambled for explanations involving solar flares, magnetic field fluctuations, mass psychogenic events. None of their theories came close to the truth. The governments that knew about Site Bravo went into overdrive, scrubbing records, silencing witnesses, burying the story under so many layers of classification that even the people doing the burying didn't know what they were hiding. The official line is that nothing happened. The unofficial line is that something happened, but nobody can agree on what. I could tell them. I could write it all down, submit it to newspapers, post it on the internet, shout it from the rooftops. But I don't. Not because I'm afraid of being silenced, but because I know it wouldn't matter. Everyone on Earth already knows the truth, even if they don't remember learning it. They felt it in that moment of golden light. They made their choice, even if they've convinced themselves it was just a dream. James stayed behind. I saw him one last time before I left the cavern, standing among the 12 interfaces, his bare feet planted on ice that no longer seemed to bother him. He told me he was happy. He told me he'd finally found peace. I wanted to believe him, but his eyes still had that wrong look, too wide, too deep, reflecting light from somewhere that wasn't this world. Theo's body was recovered by a cleanup team 3 days after I surfaced. The official cause of death was cardiac arrest, brought on by extreme cold exposure. His family held a memorial service in Portland. I didn't attend. I couldn't face his brother, couldn't stand in front of people who loved him and pretend I didn't know exactly how he died. Some nights I dream about the structure. I float in that golden light and feel the presence of everyone who's ever lived. All those preserved consciousnesses waiting patiently for humanity to make up its mind. My father is there. He doesn't speak, but I can feel him watching, feel his pride and his worry and his hope that I made the right choice. I don't know if I did. The structure is still waiting. Still keeping time. Still running its calculation in the background of every human thought, patiently accumulating the data it needs to complete its proof. The pulse has stabilized at 72 beats per minute, steady as a metronome, buying us however many years or decades or centuries we need to figure out what we really want. But sometimes, late at night, I press my fingers to my wrist and count the beats, and I notice something that makes me wonder if the choice is really as open as I thought. 72 beats per minute. Exactly 72. Not 71.9. Not 72.1. The pulse isn't slowing anymore, but it isn't speeding up either. The structure is waiting for us, and sooner or later, ready or not, we're going to have to give it an answer. I just hope we choose wisely.